All right, everyone. So we'll kick off now. Obviously, we'll have a couple of stragglers, but that's all good. Thank you all for coming along to our first SAP Knowledge Share Group and webinar of the year. I mean, in June. It's quite bizarre to think that we're making this presentation halfway through the year. Even more bizarre when you look at all the changes that have come in 2021 and 2020. So to make some introductions, for those of you that do not know, my name is Sara, this is Jay, and we are members of the SAP recruitment team here at Precision Sourcing. And Precision Sourcing is a niche IT recruitment agency, and we specialize in the areas of SAP, data and analytics, project services, and JavaScript. We'd also like to take the opportunity to thank our sponsors of this event who aim to create a mentally healthier world for everyone, and that is the Black Dog Institute. So if you wish to support the cause, we will be emailing out a link after the event where you can donate and learn more about this great organization. Now, back to what you are all here for. This year has shown such dramatic change in the hiring market, not just in SAP, but across all technologies and workforces. And the pent-up demand of the last year's projects pipeline has just started to spill over into all quarters of this year, and we're now seeing record highs in recruitment and spend.
So just to address the objective for today, the objective is to communicate that this is a changing market, and to stay on top of staff attraction and retention strategies, it's imperative that you as hiring managers, and obviously us as recruiters, we understand exactly what's driving SAP Talent when they're considering new opportunities or staying in current ones. So just to address the agenda today and what you're likely to get out of today. So we're going to look at some insights and trends into the market, such as preferences of contract and permanent and rate increases. And the second thing you'll get out of today is strategies and insights that will help you not only attract great talent to your team, but also obviously keep your team as well. And lastly, strategies for you to take note of both pre, during, and post-interview stage. So like Sara said before, now more than ever, it's critical that hiring managers and us as recruiters, we understand what is making the market tick, what is driving people to look for new opportunities or stay with their current organization. So essentially, staff attraction and staff retention.
To close out the webinar as well, we'll be giving our tips as trained interviewers and recruiters to make sure you're getting the most out of your interviews with new potential hires, some strategies you can employ pre and post interview, and some insights that you can retain the best talent in your team once you've got them there. So just a few housekeeping points before we kick off. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar. So if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, drop them into the chat box and we will address them at the end. Also to let you know, this presentation will be recorded and distributed soon afterwards. So should you want to go through it again and share it with your colleagues and companies, feel free to reach out. But also if you have any questions that you want to take offline, feel free to reach out to anyone of the team, myself, Jay, or anyone else, and we'd be more than happy to take you through it one-on-one. But without further ado, let's get into it.
All right, so as Sara just mentioned, the aim of this presentation would be to highlight some of the key changes and the drivers in the market. Now, changes we've collected and documented throughout the year. Now, just to let you know where we got this information from. So first of all, our database, our CRM, which has over 6,500 SAP professionals. We also use obviously social channels, and we're connected to more than 45,000 as a team. And we have a team of 6, as you can see on the picture here, soon to be 7 recruiters, and each recruiter speaks to over 100 candidates a week. So that's almost 3,000 SAP professionals every month. So as you can imagine, that's a lot of knowledge, both subjective and objective, and that's what we're going to share today. All right, so let's dive into the first slide. So for the 3rd year in a row, we are seeing a predominantly contract-driven market. Now, it's important to note, despite this, there has been an increase in permanent employment. Now, the team here using that knowledge, we're putting this down to two reasons. The first reason, our candidates are looking for stability, and the other reason is candidates are now looking for flexibility. So what does this mean for you as hiring managers? So it means, first of all, it's important that if your company treated your employees well during COVID, so some examples may be mental health or well-being investments, treating your contractors like permanent employees, or had a really transparent communication throughout. These are all examples of stability in a workplace that people are looking for. Now, these are things that you should be mentioning at interview stage, things that you should be promoting across social channels, and basically share that success story. You need to be proactive when hiring as well. Now, we've seen a lot of success when clients actually meet talent early, even if it's just for a coffee or whenever they get the opportunity, and not just when they're hiring. And it's important that we've identified that if you start laying the groundwork now for future resources and teams, it's something that's going to save you time and money in the long run for the recruitment process.
So important to know that while we have definitely seen an increase in permanent hires, the overwhelming preference of the market is still to remain contracting. And that's a 52% preference there, 52%, sorry. So what does this mean to you as a hiring manager? It means that there are a number of your permanent members of staff that if they do get presented with a really good contract opportunity, there is a real risk that you might lose them. The last 12 months have shown that whether you are contract or permanent, things can change drastically and quickly. And the only thing protecting them at times is their notice period. And I think that's something that the whole market has really witnessed in the last 12 months. So to ensure your team is happy where they are, we recommend sitting down with them and having regular reviews to have a health check, not just on how they're feeling in life, but also in their role. So regular reviews can mean different things to different people. We recommend a weekly review and at a very minimum every fortnight, and try to have these reviews be humanistic and holistic as opposed to KPIs and factual reviews. Really, it's important to make an effort to understand and connect with your team, not just as professionals, but as people, because the companies and leaders that did this during COVID have created a real sense of loyalty and care within their staff and team.
All right, so diving into the next slide. So it's really important to note that while remuneration and technology is still a significant driver, there's actually new primary drivers for SAP Talent post-COVID, which are work from home or flexible work, and then stability, which we've already touched on before. But the other driver that candidates are looking for is companies that have a strong leadership team. So on that point, some traits that we've seen from companies that have a strong leadership team. So first of all, just managers having, or leaders having clear and open, transparent communication, so important. Those that listen to their staff and treat them as individuals, and especially companies that have not reverted back to old habits post-COVID. So for instance, we see some companies have the mindset of when the cat's away, the mice play. Painting everyone with the same brush or micromanaging, for instance. So just focusing on the percentages here on the right hand side. If you're a hiring manager or a company that's hiring, and you're offering stability and flexible working arrangements, you've got clear and transparent communication along with a good project pipeline, you're 70% of the way there to retaining and attracting a great team. Now, with regards to remuneration, all the majority of the SAP talent want is to be paid a fair wicket.
And on that topic, and definitely a question that we as recruiters have probably been asked, probably every marketing call, every client meeting, what's going on with the contract daily rates. Now look, it's an elephant in the room, there is no getting around it. The contract rates have gone up. We've seen a large increase of 13% in contract rates from the last quarter. And this is due to a number of different factors. So an increase in budget has lots of different things that kind of come into play. There's definitely the biggest one, which is a significantly high demand for quality resources, all within a very similar time frame. There is an importance of meeting the market when creating a resourcing plan with regards to your budget to make sure that you're accessing that top percent that you do want to be talking to. And even though stability and flexibility are key drivers in the market, it's important to note that contract rates have gone up because it's the supply and demand challenge that the market has. Some things to keep in mind here, we're also in a declining population rate, and this is the first time since World War I. And with international borders shut, troubles in India with the global pandemic, we are seeing a decline in new talent entering the market as well. So it is only going to get harder from here when sourcing and retaining your staff. Make no mistake, we are in a war for talent, and when the supply is short, the rates do go up. But like Jay mentioned, if you offer remote work or long-term contracts, flexible hours, these are all benefits that you can add, and you would be 70% of the way there if you do offer that. So business is always for mutual benefit. If you flex on one thing as a hiring manager or as a company, a contractor or permanent staffer can always flex in return. It's important that when you do go to the market with hiring in mind, keep an open mind on all things.
So this is from a recent poll that we did this month in June, and what it highlights is the working arrangement preference of SAP Talent in Australia. So just to go through the slide here, so 30% of SAP Talent in Australia prefer to work remote 100% of the time. 18% of SAP Talent prefers to work on-site 100% of the time. And it's a no-brainer. The majority of SAP Talent prefer a hybrid model. And companies that have done well in attracting and retaining talent have implemented this hybrid model. Now, all too often when Sara or I or other recruiters in the SAP space or your talent teams, for instance, are taking job specs or job requirements, we're hearing the same thing. They must be on site. We're not accepting remote work, that kind of thing. Now, we certainly understand that stakeholder engagement and an on-site presence is imperative at times, but where possible, to attract and retain staff, it's important you remain flexible with working arrangements. So like Sara said before, it's all about having an open mindset. And last year, obviously, it was proven that projects don't fall behind and can be delivered successfully remotely. But on the flip side, from a wellbeing point of view, we have seen companies also encourage, some sort of office work to get that social interaction, which we need as human beings.
So the best of both worlds has shown to be a real proven success, and that is a hybrid working environment. The companies that we're seeing as recruiters that are struggling to retain their staff are ones that have forced a 100% full return to work, no questions asked. One thing we learned from last year is it's really important to be open to understanding the individual as singular, not just one size fits all. Everyone has different circumstances and needs. Another thing to keep in mind when you are going to hire the average SAP resource and what they're like and who they are, and understand what they look for in Australia. So generally in our findings, we found they are men, 40+ years in age, they've got 2 kids, they've got a mortgage, they're living in the suburbs. Try to put yourself in their shoes. What would really interest them in a role? And will it always be money or technology? Not always anymore. The working role has changed. There are different drivers now for lifestyle in the forefront, and that can be work via a hybrid model, the flexibility to pick their kids up from school, mobility to be able to choose their hours. If you're an employer in Sydney and previously, before COVID, only looked at hiring local Sydney resources because that's what you had to do, you actually had a pretty small pool to work with. A real positive that's come out of COVID is now that we are opening up to arrangements of remote work, flexibility, interstate without that risk of fly in, fly out, you've now opened yourself up to a whole new pool of candidates, not just in Australia, now sometimes even in New Zealand or similar time zones. So these are really important things to keep in mind, particularly as we are in a declining population and with international borders still being mostly shut, there is a lack of new talent. So try to keep an open mind when looking into the whole market.
So Sara mentioned obviously the busy market there. So I suppose this stat is important to emphasize just how busy the market is at the moment. So exploring this and how often your staff are getting approached. So 69% of SAP Talent get approached every month about a new opportunity. So yeah, like I said, it's extremely busy. Now, as hiring managers, it's imperative that you are aware of whether your current team is happy in work and outside of work. So to find this out, like Sara mentioned before, have regular reviews to ensure they're still enjoying their time at work, while also addressing any concerns that come up in their day-to-day. Now, as we mentioned before, we speak to 3,000 candidates a month as a team, and the candidates that are happy in their role, they do have those regular weekly reviews with their peers. So just to reiterate what a good review is, you talk about their work, you also talk about their home life and their health. Make sure they've got a sense of purpose and a sense of belonging. And most importantly, what part they're playing in the vision of the business. Like, everyone's got a part to play in that. So reminding them what part it is. Now, an insight for any candidate that might be looking for a new opportunity. Now, before going to market, what we recommend is ask yourself the question: can your current role be rectified if you are unhappy? Now, all too often, just a simple conversation with your manager is missed, and they can basically get a better understanding of your work experience across all challenges, flexibility, stability, remuneration, and workload. So have that conversation with your manager. And if you are a manager or a hiring manager looking after a team, it's important to be open to these conversations and approach them with an open mindset, and always ask for feedback as well.
Now, we all know how much time and effort recruiting the right person for the role can take. So we want to say, as recruiters, we understand it's really important that you find the best person at the best price and the best time. Now, if you can rely on your internal network and your talent team to do this as a hiring manager or as a company, this is 100% a cost-effective option. And we as recruiters are the first ones to probably be able to tell you that. But one thing we do ask is to weigh up the cost at the time these options can take. And sometimes that is a lot of it. So running adverts, yes, you do get the odd gem, but even us as trained recruiters who know how to write the adverts only get 2% of our placements coming from job boards. And day to day, as Jay mentioned, we have a team of 6, soon to be 7 in the SAP team alone that are calling 20 candidates every day in specific markets. So if you are a hiring manager or a talent acquisition partner that has the time to do that, fantastic. This is 100% the option for you. But if you are under time pressures or you're struggling to find a niche talent or skill, consider reaching out to the agencies. And in the long run, we promise you this is going to save you time and money in the long run, while tapping into that top 5% of dormant talent that don't normally hang out the job boards. So now Jay and I will be breaking down some of our key strategies and tips that you can employ to attract and retain staff, keeping in mind all the information that we've just shared. So this is going to be focusing around the importance of having your own brand as an SAP professional and as a manager, the importance of knowing your company's story, some tips during the interview, tips after the interview, and retention strategies you can start implementing now with your current team.
All right, so let's dive into that first point, and it's in the interest of being really proactive and the importance of having a brand. So even before hiring, like we mentioned, it's important that you build a brand, not just your company brand, but your own personal leadership brand. Now, you can do this via social media channels. You can also do this with every interaction you have with somebody outside of your organization or inside, and living by your brand. So just a quick tip on how to do this. So identify 3 words on how you'd like to be perceived as an SAP leader in the market. So just some examples: you could want to be perceived as transparent. You could want to be perceived as driven, or leads from the front, for instance. So if you have those 3 words. Now, when you go to post on social media, have those 3 words at the front of mind, and that message will naturally come through and shine through to differentiate you. Now, just while we're on the topic of social media as well, and LinkedIn, for instance, some other things to promote if you are a hiring manager posting, or if your company's posting on LinkedIn. So if you have a diverse team in your organization, that's proven to be a high performing team. So you as your manager should be promoting that across LinkedIn. Now, coming to the second point, if you are a leader that does promote flexibility or flexible working, you should be posting that on LinkedIn, because the reach is massive. If you've had success with a project, or even a high performer, say someone's got promoted in your team, you should be celebrating that. And again, it's another point to promote on LinkedIn, and that's going to start to build your brand. We also encourage hiring managers or companies or clients to be on like podcasts and webinars like this, or events. And when you do that, get the content and push that across social media channels. And what that's going to do is going to make you stand out, and you're able to share your story, and people will start to buy into that. So I'm just going to show you some examples of a leader in the SAP market that's actually beginning to promote his brand across social platforms. So it gives you like a real insight. So this gentleman, Alex Aiken, he works for SAP Australia, and take a look at his first post here on the left-hand side. So firstly, this really does promote a humanistic side of Alex. Secondly, it shows he's a big advocate for flexibility and flexible work arrangements. And then lastly, it shows that SAP are a company, and by the way, he's tagged them into this post, but it shows them, or it shows the market, that they buy into this. Okay, so that's a really good example of post. Moving on, there's other examples of this as well, where, like I said, he's beginning to build his brand. So yeah, moving over to this one, SAP Australia had a mental health day, where they gave their employees a day off, which was a fantastic approach. And I saw numerous people, not only Alex, but numerous people in the organization, employees of the company and leaders, that were posting about this. Again, brilliant for branding. Now, the last one I mentioned before, that recognition is huge. So a big part of Alex's leadership style is recognizing high performers, and as you can see, he's done that through the posts. So they're just some simple examples of being proactive and beginning to build a brand.
Now, as good as it is building your own brand, you also need to know your company and what your company stands for. So keeping in mind, even before you interview and start going to the market to hire, just as well as you've got your personal brand in mind, have in your mind clearly what your company does well and what this means to you as an employee. Let's not forget, a really powerful story when you are interviewing is people hearing about your own experiences within your company. You're a perfect story to tell. So that can mean a couple of things. It can mean your company's journey, the story, their purpose as a whole. All too often, we've seen, and we've sat in on a lot of interviews, in the past year, because they've been run on Teams mostly, but we've sat on so many interviews where the focus is what needs to be done right now, nothing about before or after, or even in the future. So it's really important to remember to show the journey of what has been done, what has gotten you to this point as a leader, as a team, and as a company. So keep in mind as well, super important, that the impact a new hire would have on the company. Tell them the benefit that this role would also have on their lives, and some of the benefits it's had on yours as well.
All right, so just moving now to during the interview, which we're all familiar with. Now, it's important to, first of all, sell the company benefits. Second of all, it's important to express your leadership and your management style. And it's also important to ask the question how the interviewee likes to be led. Now, These can cover a lot of unspoken questions an interviewee might be thinking during the interview. Now, some other tips, where possible, include some of your team members in the interview stages. Now, the objective of that would be for the candidate to get a greater insight into the company and culture, and ask any questions they're not comfortable asking the leadership team or the interviewer, for instance. And also, it's a chance to sell back to the stability piece we mentioned before, and it also reinforces the part that the candidate's going to play in the journey of the company or the project. And yes, I would recommend doing this for both contract and permanent hires. Now, the objective really, like I said before, the more you can communicate what part they will play in the journey and what the position will do for them, the better.
Now, an interesting area that has come up, and we think it's definitely down to how busy this market has been, is post-interview. And by that, I mean the moments between offer stage and a start date. So post-interview and offer stages have become critical. We've seen dropout rates just going through the roof between those times due to the busy nature of the market. Just because someone's gotten the offer, signed the contract, if they're waiting out for a whole month in their notice period, think about all the calls they're going to be getting during that time about opportunities that are just around the corner. So there are some really important touch points that you can start building on, but the most important is build that relationship from the interview stage and take it all the way through past their first day. So some tips here: you can encourage your team to meet new hires before they start. Again, get that building relationship, not just with yourself as their leader, but with the team that they'll be working with and their peers. Show new hires around the office before they start. Have them physically come in and feel like that's going to be part of it. This makes them feel like part of the team already. And then something really simple as you can do as leaders and as managers: meet them for a coffee or a drink before they start, and talk about things that just aren't work related. Ask about their family, ask about some of their trials and tribulations, them as people. If you start connecting on a holistic and humanistic level rather than that 9-to-5 grind, you're going to find that feeling of loyalty and belonging go through the roof very early on.
All right, and now focusing on some retention strategies. So retention strategies are to invest in your current team, and now that investment could be as simple as making time to catch up with them for at least 5 minutes a week, for instance. Invest in upskilling or cross-skilling across technologies. Like we mentioned, all throughout this, have regular reviews with your team. As a leader, it's really important that you ask for feedback, but it's equally as important, if you're not prepared to take on board that feedback, simply don't ask. And as I mentioned before, it's not one size that fits all. Everyone in your team is different, so adapt to each individual and their needs.
That just about concludes our presentation on staff retention and attraction in the SAP market. So thank you all for your time this afternoon. We really appreciate it. Lunch hours are important. And as we mentioned at the start, we wanted to communicate that this is a changing market, and that to stay on top of staff attraction and retention strategies, it's imperative that you as hiring managers and we as recruiters understand exactly what is driving this SAP market when they're considering new opportunities or staying in their current ones. So we hope we've done that for you.
Now, while we do love putting on events like this and giving back to the market, it's important to note that Precision Sourcing is, of course, a recruitment agency, first and foremost. So if you do have any needs in the SAP, data analytics, project services, or JavaScript markets, please don't hesitate to reach out to the team, and we'll be more than happy to help.
We'd also just like to take the opportunity once more to thank our sponsors for this event, the Black Dog Institute. It's already come up a few times in this presentation, but mental health and well-being is at the forefront of everyone's minds, especially given the last year that we've all been through. So if you do want to find out more about this great organization and what they are doing in the mental health world, then please click the link that we'll be sending out after this to find out how you can do more. And now question time. So there are a few questions that came through. We'll do our best to answer them now, so bear with us. Let's have a look. What was the increase in permanent and for what time period?
Yeah, great question. So historically, before COVID, it was 65% contract, and now it's down at 49%. So what's the maths there? Like 14%.
Yeah.
So it has increased. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of activity from consultancies, your Accentures, your Capgeminis. They're all aggressively hiring. Yeah, that's obviously a big indicator as to why permanent has increased. And also, like we mentioned before, candidates are looking now for stability, whether that is contract or permanent. So we are speaking to, like I said, a lot of candidates, and when we ask them what their preference is, yeah, stability comes above contract or permanent now. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question there.
Even on that, I think a really important note is during 2020, not a lot of projects were going through, and projects are a contractor's game. Instead, we saw a lot of BAU upgrades, enhancements, and they do lend themselves more towards a permanent skill set. Now, obviously, we're now seeing it swing a little bit to the other side now that projects are coming back online. Another one, wondering as figures add up to about 70%, what the other factors were there. So the other big one was the 28% remuneration. So,
yeah.
But like we mentioned, that's just a 30%. And even at times, it's just, you know, that wasn't in any particular order, just the most common answers. So like we mentioned, if you're still hitting stability, flexibility, good leadership and transparent communication, all that other good stuff, you really are 70% of the way there. And remuneration, like 9 times out of 10, are the first questions we're getting asked now. It is, what's their work from home policy? If I have to leave for 3 p.m., do they allow myself, you know, just going to pick up the kids, that kind of thing.
So that's changed. It's changed a lot post-COVID to pre-COVID. If you look at pre-COVID, there was a lot of emphasis around technology. If a company was implementing the latest and greatest technology, that was a major driver for talent. And remuneration was second in that. But yeah, post-COVID, stability, flexibility, a leadership team that's clear and transparent. These are all kind of shining through their new drivers for SAP Talent. Now, of course, does SAP Talent want to be paid a fair wicket? Absolutely. But there are other significant drivers now.
Yeah. Next question, and a good one. How is the move to S/4HANA affecting the market? I mean, that is a really good one. I would say that it's probably not affected the market just as much as SAP fully wanted to at the beginning. We all know at first it was a hard 2025 stop for ECC support. That obviously wasn't well received in the market. Aussies are pretty stubborn when we give it an ultimatum. So there was a lot of pushback, and now it's at 2027. So if we look at the timeline and your average S/4HANA implementation for a medium to large size company, that normally takes anywhere between 2 to 4 years. I think that right now the SAP market's on the precipice of what is going to be a huge push to S/4HANA. The majority of these projects are going to have to kick off within the next 12 to 24 months. We've already seen a really high number in the last 2 quarters alone start to kick off. That's in all aspects, business cases getting approved, proof of concept getting approved, and now actual mobility to get the program running. So it is starting to affect the market, but I think the big worry and the point that we bring up to a lot of the clients is, think about where you're going to be getting these resources. If you're making S/4HANA a must-have, the reality is there are only so many in the SAP market, and that's the challenge. You're not now just dealing with a declining population or international borders shut and no new talent coming in. You're dealing with already a really niche skill set that is going to start to just shorten your pool again and again and again. So the one thing we already mentioned there was upskilling your current team, cross-skilling them in technologies. If you've got a really good BAU team or a really good internal project team, now is the time to start training them on S/4HANA technologies and what that will mean, because that is not just a huge incentive for them to stay with a company, that's a huge incentive for you as a company to use the resources that you have already to implement what you know is just a few years down the line.
Yeah, and that's why retention is huge. It's absolutely huge in this market, because, like we said before, the population is declining, the borders are shut. There's no new talent. It's been proven that the SAP market has an aging talent pool, and there's no real the youth of tomorrow that are coming into SAP. Yeah, retention strategies are probably paramount importance than attracting at the moment.
Yeah. Another great question: what are the statistics of female candidates in the SAP market? Slim. Yeah. Unfortunately, that is the reality. I mean,
14%.
Yeah, not just in SAP. I mean, we're seeing it more in all areas, obviously in the STEM market, but really I think SAP has been quite hardly hit. And it's interesting when you really trace back the market of SAP, you go back 20 to 25 years as to when the technology first came to Australia. You had a generally male IT team that was just pulled into that SAP technology. And those professionals are still kicking around in the market today. They're the consultants and contractors out there with 20 to 25 plus years in SAP. They've got X amount of project implementations under their belt, and they're still operating and taking up quite a bit of the work. The reality is, again, a lack of new talent coming in, but just the uni students of today aren't, lining up at the door to join SAP grad programs or to learn about SAP in uni. I mean, I can probably count on both hands the amount of graduates I've had reach out to me on LinkedIn and that kind of thing. It's just not something that is at the forefront of the market. And unfortunately, that extends not just to new talent, but women in the SAP market as well.
Yeah, a pitfall that, just to answer your question further there, Charmaine, a percentage of women, what we see a lot of clients say in job specs is we need more women, and we want more women. It's actually the wrong approach. It's actually diverse teams that have been proven to be high performing teams. So that's men, women, everyone. But yeah, from diverse backgrounds or religions or
different walks of life.
Yeah. It's actually diverse teams. So yeah, we've seen that over the last 2 years, and we're actually attending a course soon, just so we can better educate clients on this factor, because it is really important. So yeah, great question.
Yeah, definitely. Which tech within SAP are you finding the most traction in the market? Oh, that's a good one. The first one that comes to mind for me, and it's funny, it's actually the third-party applications that are starting to get plugged into SAP. So that is like your SuccessFactors and Ariba that obviously were absorbed by the company, but now even technologies like AWS platforms, Power BI and BI visualization tools. I think we all can recognize the huge impact and influence a really good data and analytics base can have on your business, and particularly on your SAP platform and how that can run. They're the first ones that come to my mind. How about you?
Soft skill roles, anything business focused. Long gone are the days with the techie that sits in the corner. The ability to story tell, the ability to take the business on the journey, the ability to have that C-level stakeholder engagement, regardless of the technology knowledge that you might have. That's first and foremost. That's the skill. Regardless of technology, that's the skill. If you have that and you work hard on that, you will. There'll be ample opportunities. So
yeah, that's a really good point. How you connect to the business and the stakeholders, how you communicate, storytelling, a huge piece that has come up again and again. Next question is, have you assessed to what regard people are open to relocation? That's a really good one. I'll start with state by state relocation. We haven't formally assessed it, but I can just talk to the responses and answers, because we do get asked this question quite a bit. Particularly, Precision's been working with quite a few New Zealand-based companies at the moment. That is a question that's coming up because the New Zealand market's just as short, if not shorter, than the Australian one at the moment. The vast majority of people that I speak to as a recruiter are open to occasional travel, but full relocation has not really been something that many people at all are up to. I think you need to have a lot of Like that selling piece to have someone move their life and their family during COVID to another state or another country needs to be hitting a lot of the right points. And I think that comes down to an individual preference rather than a market general statement.
We'll definitely include that in the next talent survey. I really like that. Really like that question, because I know there's some large programs down in Adelaide, for instance, and finding Perth and finding resources there is a challenge for any company. So yeah, I really like that question, and definitely we'll include that in our next talent survey as well.
Even some clients that we work with that do have a hybrid working model have even said, like we've said, that element of stakeholder engagement that you only really do get face-to-face is still really imperative. So even the question of state travel now is one that's got a lot more contention around it. I think gone are the days of that regular fly in, fly out. I think it's really changed. Down to the final few questions now. How does the SAP analytics market compare to other analytics tools and skills? That probably follows on from my BI comment. And a good question. I would say, and again, we haven't formally, done any big research on it. We're just drawing from the clients that we've spoken to and the candidates that we've spoken to. SAP Analytics, and I'm assuming here that you're talking about Analytics Cloud, is still a program that is definitely starting to gain some momentum, but perhaps not as much when you compare it to its A, much cheaper, and B, much more flexible programs such as Power BI and Tableau. In terms of Analytics Cloud, a lot of the clients measure up the storytelling ability, the ease of access, how easy it is to use. And when you measure those three against some of the tools that have been around that market for a little bit longer, it's just becoming more and more common, the blend of SAP and other analytics and Power BI and BI tools. Even seeing it as recruiters, obviously I'm pure SAP, my colleague Laura is pure BI, and 12 to 18 months ago, we never would have had a crossover. In the last 12 months though, in the last 6 months, we're seeing more and more, we're looking at a job description and we're trying to decide, who does this go to? Is it Laura or is it me? And that's really something interesting that's come from the last 12 months.
Yeah, okay. And then from DJ.
Hey DJ, COVID taught organizations the massive gap in preparedness and resilience. What's your view on how high the ANZ markets would go now for additional SAP work across industries? Is that how high in terms of a rate, in terms of a monetary number, or in terms of resilience? I'm not sure there. Let's see if DJ comes back to us. Let me try to read it again. COVID taught organizations the massive gap in preparedness and resilience. Quantum of work. Okay. Right, got you. Ooh, that's a good one. I would say we did see people being a lot more productive, not just in SAP, even in our own office. I think that, yeah, that preparedness and resilience, the companies that offered flexible work all of a sudden saw their productivity numbers go like through the roof. Yeah. The quantity of work also naturally then adjusted to that. I don't think we saw a lot of clients, necessarily cracking the whip and getting people to work over hours. It's just that people had a tendency to take on that little bit more work. I'll, log off at 5, I'll go do some things, and I'll quickly check my emails at my desk at home again at 7 and stuff like that. I think that the quantity of work has progressed because the market has adjusted and taking on a little bit more, just because the way of working has changed.
Sure. And that's why it's important to invest in well-being. Mental health, and because people did work a hell of a lot more. Burnout. Weren't taking breaks. So ensuring your staff has regular breaks and regular holidays, and ensure they're not burning out.
And this might be the last question that we have time for. Interested in salary data. Do you think salaries and contractor rates have increased over the last financial year?
Yeah, it is a great question, and I have the same answer pre-COVID to post-COVID, and it depends.
How long's a piece of string?
How long's a piece of string? How long is the some of those other points that we were talking about earlier around investing in staff? Like, for instance, if a company's going to invest in certifications and invest in that employee, then, you know, or invest in other drivers that they may have, then remuneration is sometimes an afterthought. So it really is case by case. You know, is the company, is, you know, one of the requirements you have to travel, for instance. You know, if you're traveling, then yeah, you have to consider the expenses and the fly in, fly out rates or salaries. So it's exactly the same pre-COVID to post-COVID. It's really important to understand that it is case by case. I'm so against the market rates or market salaries. You know, and the reason why is just because of that. It really is case by case scenario. What is the work? What is the project? What's expected? What's this role going to do for the candidate's life? What part is this candidate going to play? What's the supply and demand in the market? If you're going to market for a really niche skill set and you're tapping into someone that's happy in a role, they're not looking, and your remuneration might be that person's driver, then of course you're going to have to pay significantly more or more than what they're on. So again, a case by case situation. If you're going to market for a very like generalist role, you've got a lot of applicants, you can get them through a job board. Supply and demand is, you know, it's good. Then yeah, the salary and rate should reflect that, in my opinion. So that's any advice to any candidates for any situation. You know, when you're speaking to a company, and it does come to the point of negotiating a rate or negotiating a salary, try and stay away from those terms of, oh, I just want to be paid market rate or just want to be paid market salary, because yeah, it really is case by case situation. And if you feel that a client is underpaying for the role or underpaying for the role in terms of contract or permanent, it's okay to push back.
Yeah,
it's okay to push back, but it's how you do that. And every pushback is a chance to gain some credibility. But yeah, it's how you do that.
Yeah, and we can help with that. It's definitely I think a conversation that doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. I've also had a lot of people ask me after they've interviewed at first and they've already put their salary expectation in or their contract rate in, and they have the interview, they find out more about the role, what's actually expected, and turns out it's a little bit different to how they originally thought. I've had a lot of people ask, well, do I have to now stick to that number? My advice is always that question, if it's going to give you pause at the end, should be asked earlier. It's something that if you want to cover off, well, maybe my expectation was a little bit wrong, it's always better to bring that up at the beginning of the conversation rather than at the offer stage. And that's even something from a client as well. If you've interviewed a candidate and you know that they're going to be a little bit out of budget, but you want to find out anyway, like definitely do that. But don't leave that budget question or that salary expectation question right to the very end of the offer. I mean, again, every touch point and conversation that you can have earlier on in the process gives you credibility as a manager, because it shows I'm thinking ahead here. I'm not just going to come in at the last minute with an adjusted expectation. And
just to, I guess, go on that point, remuneration is a very emotive topic, but for contractors, it really shouldn't be. So if you're a contractor with in an organisation, it's so imperative that you don't approach a manager and say, I want a rate increase because I've been here for 7 years.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that a lot from contractors at the moment. Tenure is not a negotiation point for a rate increase. The organisation could come to the contractor and say the same thing. You've been with us 7 years. That means you're due a rate decrease. It doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. And all too often we're hearing this in the market. So some points for a rate increase is very important. That, like a project, when it starts, you build a business case. So has your scope changed or increased? Has your role changed as a contractor? Are you now on multiple projects? These are all points to warrant a rate increase, not tenure. So I wanted to stress that today as well. So yeah, like I said, it shouldn't be an emotive topic. It is, we get it, but certainly, yeah, looking at your scope, looking at the projects that you're working on, these are all good points.
Yeah, we could have a whole webinar on this probably. Even another point to keep in mind, some things you can't put a monetary value on, and that is like flexible working hours. It's how much you can see your manager cares, not just about the work that you're putting in, but about your mental health, how your day was, how your family's doing, how your kids are doing in school. You know, that ability to pick kids up from 3 and then log in again at 5. These are things that you really can't put a money value on. And it's important to consider that when you are looking at your salaries, because these are benefits that, while they don't have, you know, zeros behind them, they are like massive sell points that can really sway a decision when people are considering new roles or staying in current ones as well.
Brilliant. Apologies if we didn't get to every question. We will follow up with the individuals that have posted. Thank you for your questions. That's fantastic. Really appreciate you taking time out of your lunch hour today to listen. As Sara mentioned before, this is recorded, so we'll send it out to everyone that's registered. And like I said, we'll get back to those of you that have unanswered questions. But until then, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks so much. Have a good one, everyone, and yeah, feel free to reach out. See you next time.